Also, President Trump making what he called a major announcement and threatening to impose 100% secondary tariffs on Russia if it doesn't reach a peace deal with Ukraine in 50 days. The president making that announcement alongside the NATO Secretary General at the White House earlier today, expressing his growing frustration with the Russian president, of course, Vladimir Putin, amid Moscow's ongoing attacks on Ukraine. Here's a little bit more of what the president had to say.
One of the reasons that you're here today is to hear that we are very unhappy, I am, with Russia. But we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means.
Well, President Trump announcing an arms deal with NATO as well, where European countries will buy U.S. weapons to send to Ukraine. The president also adding that he expects some weapons, including Patriot systems, to arrive in Ukraine within days. I'm going to bring in our ABC News chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell. He's on the ground there in Kyiv for us. So, Ian, first of all, certainly a big announcement here, though. But the questions are, what comes next for Ukraine? How are both Kyiv and Moscow responding to what the president said today?
Yeah, certainly a big announcement. I think most importantly, in terms of the Trump administration, a total about change. I remember President Trump has praised Vladimir Putin. He said that he believed promises that had been made by Vladimir Putin about being serious about peace negotiations. But the president obviously has gone very cool on that, not least because despite the promises that have been made, the reality on the ground is that Ukraine has come under consistent and increased heavy bombardment. Officially, there is a very warm reaction to what the president has had to say. Those Patriot missile defense systems, what they do is they basically launch projectiles that intercept incoming missiles and destroy them. So they're crucial in trying to defend the cities that have been under relentless bombardment. We believe something in the region of 17 of these systems will be provided by Europe, as you said, and then those European nations will be able to buy new systems from the United States. So it isn't the US sending money or systems necessarily, but it's agreeing to sell them to the Europeans who then buy them and pass on their old systems. So they're all very, very pleased with it. I think there is another attitude here that people have heard promises before. They've received aid from the United States and from other European nations, and none of it has really had an impact. If you ask people on the street, people are just war weary. And I think certainly in the words of one Ukrainian analyst, what she said to me was, this is like giving morphine to a dying patient. For the Russians, they're saying, well, look, this doesn't make much change because America has continually supplied weapons to Ukraine throughout this war. But nevertheless, I think there will be some concern that this is President Trump going cool on Vladimir Putin.
All right, Ian Pannell, our thanks to you for that and your very important perspective. Join me now with more here is former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kay Bailey Hutchinson. Thank you for being here with us, Ambassador. So first of all, what is your response here? Do you think the threat of tariffs against Russia will force Putin into these peace talks, since it's also combined with this weapons deal to arm Ukraine?
I think Putin is having some meetings in Moscow to think about very carefully what his next step is, because I think the first time he has ever really heard President Trump say, now we're going to arm Ukraine again, and it is going to be serious. And if we don't have some movement, actually, he said, if we don't have an agreement in 50 days, then those secondary sanctions will come in. And we know that Congress will pass those sanctions to support the president's position, because it is a very bipartisan support for Ukraine in Congress right now.
All right, we're hearing from Republicans in the Senate. They've got the bill ready to go. In terms of those secondary tariffs, though, they would target Russia's trading partners as well, with major impacts on uranium and oil, according to the White House. How will that isolate Moscow on the global economy?
It will be a huge difference for them, because both China and India have bought Russia's oil and gas. That has fueled the war in Ukraine. I think the Russian economy would suffer greatly with those kinds of sanctions. We haven't had the secondary sanctions like this before. And President Trump said 100%. So 100% sanction on the oil and gas out of Russia has got to make a difference to India and China as well, for what they have been doing to really fuel this terrible war that Russia has perpetrated against Ukraine.
Right, fuel and or fund. Also, we know that sending weapons to Ukraine has been a hotly debated issue, not only at the White House, right, but in Congress as well. So do you think this military policy to have NATO purchase American-made weapons will benefit the American economy, and for how long?
Well, certainly it is going to offset the billions that America has put into this. I think we have to continue to be a part of NATO and to be a contributing partner. But I think this war, I think, must be in some ways the burden should be on Europe for their area. And I think we will contribute, of course, a lot in the kind of weapons that only we can provide.
And what do you think the message is right now that is being sent to Putin and to Zelensky? Because we know that the president has issued several stark warnings on behalf of both of them in the past.
Well, I think the president has now seen that Putin is not going to be a fair player here. I think that took a long time for the president to realize that while Putin was talking well to him, that then turning around the very same 24-hour period and bombing the people, the innocent civilians in Ukraine. And I think the president is set up, and I think he is showing it for the first time. I think Putin should be reconsidering what he has been doing seriously. And I think the president now is prepared to be on the side of trying to make peace, but understanding that this war has been put forward by Putin.
Right. Right. 50 days. That clock is ticking. Ambassador Hutchison, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much.